What's up, everybody? Phil Perry here for the Next Pats podcast. Thanks for being with us. We have a great episode lined up for you today. We are bringing in Tyler Dunne, one of the finest football writers in the country, in my opinion. He just laid out a multi-part series on the New York Giants and what the hell has happened with that organization over the last several years under Dave Gettleman. We will get into that, but we will also get into this upcoming matchup between the Patriots and Bills. And it's not going to be a traditional preview per se, but what we will be doing is talking about team building, something we love to do here on Next Pats, and what matters more, especially this time of year, having the great quarterback or being the balanced team, because I think that is really what defines these two teams, the Bills and the Patriots, respectively, right now. So let's get into our conversation with Tyler without any further ado. All right, there he is, our guy, Tyler Dunne from golongtd.com. Make sure you guys are subscribing to Go Long. You can find all Tyler's work there. He does a phenomenal job. I mentioned off the top the piece that he has done, multi-part piece that he has done called the Autopsy. Very appropriate on this seemingly dead franchise in New Jersey, the New York Giants. The other one, we're usually talking about the Jets here, but the Giants. And Tyler, first of all, thank you for being with us, because I know this has been a busy week. Holidays, this piece has come out. I'm sure everybody in New York wants to talk to you right now. So thanks for being with us.
Pleasure's all here, Phil. Thanks for doing it. We're overdue. I owed you a podcast spot. So timing's good, right? Bills, Patriots, Giants dysfunction. What else could a football fan do?
Couldn't be better. It could not be better. And I want to get to this piece first and foremost, because a lot of it is about Dave Gettleman, how things operated there behind the scenes in the front office, how they were evaluating players. And that's what we love to talk about here. Ty, we call this the Next Pats podcast. A lot of it off-season wise is based on the draft. We talk a lot about the Senior Bowl. You have some interesting tidbits on the Senior Bowl in this Giants piece. But to me, some big picture things that come up throughout here that I think would be interesting for our purposes are what we can learn about what not to do from the Giants. And one thing that continues to pop up in both of the parts that I have read is that it felt like there was a shutting out of the scouting staff by Dave Gettleman, maybe even by ownership. There's this weird relationship where people who own the team are actually evaluating players and making inputs about how the team should be built. So what do you think the rest of the league can learn from the Giants when it comes to player evaluation and how that process goes?
Great question, Phil. I think that every team, every owner of every team, I should say, if you're interested in winning games, you need to have a clear distinction between business, ownership, and football. And right, it's not rocket science. We see this every year with the team somewhere where ownership is meddling. Their fingerprints are around the team one way or another. At least in Dallas, Jerry Jones makes no bones about it. I mean, it's right there on the website, general manager. And he talks about picking players. He talks about being persuaded not to take Johnny Manziel and being talked in and out of different players. I think he's gotten better over the years with Will McClay having some say. But, the Giants are known as that model franchise. The Giants are known as the team that has it figured out. And the more I talk to people and the more you use your own eyeballs and go on their site and see Chris Mara right there at the top of the personnel department. And then right below him, it's the nephew of the owner. And they are this shadow scouting staff. And they did hang on to Eli Manning too long. And anytime they promote a general manager, it's a familiar face. It's Dave Gettleman, who was there for a number of years. Now it could be Kevin Abrams, who's been there 23 years. That's when you just run into the same problems again and again and again and again, and round you go. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but pick to pick, draft to draft, I think that's how you make mistakes. You don't have that one clear, independent football person where the buck stops with him. They need that to fix everything in New York.
And the question is, when ownership is involved, is that going to happen? I mean, would ownership be willing to remove itself from the equation in that way? I think, we all around here have given Robert Kraft a lot of credit for, once he hired Bill Belichick, at least, stepping away, right? And so he gets a lot of praise for his hands-off, quote unquote, approach. And of course he has say when it comes to contracts and things like that. And there are certain decisions that the owners have to make. But Bill Belichick, it really is. I've asked him many times over the years about things like, how much would you be willing to, for instance, pay a backup quarterback when Jimmy Garoppolo was still here? And we were talking about the future of Tom Brady. And even with something like that, which we know the owner has some say in, if not the say in, and he was negotiating a lot of Tom Brady's contracts, but publicly, at least, he'd say, hey, we've got a guy who's done a pretty good job making all the football decisions around here for a while. I'm going to leave that one to him. It does feel like, though, between the people at the top in New York, Tyler, and then the scouts, who I think a lot of people would view as sort of, obviously much lower on the totem pole, there's this disconnect. And around here in New England, there was a storyline that was really up until this past offseason. Okay, is Bill Belichick including his scouts enough? How important do you think it is for whoever it is that's at the top to be as inclusive as possible with the guys who are the quote unquote boots on the ground?
It's massively important. And I think the bigger picture here with owners, and this is every professional sports league, right? It's you're really good at something, right? You built this business up. You became this billionaire. You decide to buy a team. You're going to be surrounded by yes men and yes women. You're going to be told how great you are day in and day out. And you need to be open to setting your ego aside and being challenged, right? And I think that's probably why the Patriots have had so much success. Robert Kraft doesn't strike me as somebody who's a czar and it's a tyrannical reign over there. And what he says goes. He's open to being challenged. He's open to giving Bill Belichick that kind of control. And I'm sure there's disagreements. Obviously, there's been a lot there, but that's a good thing. You want that robust debate. You want to be challenged. And I think that what you see with the Giants is, you know what? They're not going to fire Chris Mara. Are they really going to fire him? Are you really going to fire your brother? Probably not. And how much say does he really have? It's kind of clouded in this mystery. Nobody really knows, but his name is right there. So he involved to some degree. And if you bring in an outside voice, an independent thinker, that person might tell you something you don't want to hear. They needed that back with Eli Manning in 2014, 2015, 2016. They hung on to Eli Manning 3, 4, 5 years longer than they should have. If you're open to the idea of being challenged and having everything you think about a player challenged, you move on from Eli, you transition to the next era. Maybe you're open to trading up for Patrick Mahomes like the Chiefs were when Ben McAdoo loves him. They're not open to thinking outside of the box. So you're going to run into problems again and again. And about the scouts, they're just, under Dave Gettleman, he came in and wiped their memories, changed the whole scouting service. Didn't really include them in conversations where, with the Daniel Jones pick, he's not even saying how he feels about the guy. So they don't even know. So you don't even have that conversation. The scouts are the ones that know these prospects better than anybody. I think they should be heard.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just, the collaborative, quote unquote, collaborative process that we've heard about here in New England, because I think for several years there, that was very much not the case, or at least that's what we would hear, right? That, it's Bill Belichick's decision on all of these picks. And it felt like some guys maybe were not being heard. This past offseason, even Robert Kraft went out of his way to talk about he's seeing a different approach to the draft and to free agency and things of that nature. So like an interesting contrast there. Even the team published a video. I don't know if you saw this at the time, but when they made the pick of Mac Jones, Bill Belichick goes around the war room and he goes, "Okay, you okay with this, Matt? You okay with this, Elliot? You okay with this, Dave? We feel good about this. We want." And who knows? That's what goes out to us. So is that for show? Is that really what's going on? It does sound like, even though, even from people behind the scenes saying it was a little bit different this past year. So maybe the Giants need a little bit more of that, is what you're saying, Tyler.
Well, they did do that for a while, and it started to change. The COVID draft 2020, all of the scouts were kept on a separate Zoom call. Like they weren't even involved at all. And then somebody would pop in from the inner circle and be like, "All right, guys, we're taking Andrew Thomas. All right, guys, we're taking Xavier McKinney." And these guys might work out, but they're not even having a voice at all. They're not going around the room for any final thoughts. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. And it's just crazy to me, Dave Gettleman. Why not just put him out of his misery a month ago? I mean, they're trying to gracefully nudge him into retirement, but everybody knows that he's a goner. Just move on, right? Like start your search. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but I think that, the fans are the ones pouring millions of dollars into this product. They deserve some direction. They deserve more than a medium soda on Fan Appreciation Day. Oh boy. It's a mess of a franchise right now.
That's a great nugget in your story as well. Fan Appreciation Day. I think you only got one, right? You get one medium soda.
One per PSL.
PSL, right.
God forbid get one for your 7-year-old son. Can't have that.
No. Well, I mean, this stuff's poison anyway. If you listen to Tom Brady, you would say, you know what, good on the Giants. Should have been a small, maybe even a bottle of water. Let's hit him with a bottle of water.
Some avocado concoction of some sort.
Would you want that job? You're talking about Dave Gettleman, his future.
Yeah.
There are Patriots people that, for instance, Dave Ziegler, he's not technically the general manager here. He's just been elevated to that sort of Nick Caserio position here locally. Monty Austinfort was somebody who was high up in the Patriots front office. He's now with the Titans. If you're one of these guys that might be interested in making that jump, is this a job you would want? Because you mentioned this is sort of a model franchise. This is, a staple league everybody looks to as this. That's how you want to do things type of franchise. But is that really the case? And would you want this job, Tyler, if you were a potential GM?
That is a fantastic question, number one. And I just checked in with a couple of execs around the league that I know who are, cut from that same cloth, guys that their next step would be general manager. And one of them texted me back and said, I talked to people in the organization and they just sound miserable. They hate it there. And I don't know if I want to go there. I think the person I talked to, I think he still would be open to it. Who doesn't want to be a general manager and take on that challenge? But it's pretty clear that, within the scouting community, people know that it's not ideal with the New York Giants when publicly, in a press conference, we're led to believe things are merry, everything's fine. This is the model franchise. And internally, there just isn't this clear distinction of like, okay, you're in this department, you do this, you're in that department, you do that. And this is who's making the final call. It's going to be in this inclusive process. It's kind of making it up as you go.
And the reason why, I do think, the Patriots connection there is obviously a strong one now with Joe Judge. And so it wouldn't be surprising to me if maybe, although, you wrote in your piece, the Mars are probably going to want to stay internal. They're going to probably want to go with somebody that they know really well to elevate to that position. So I guess we'll see on that front. But what have you been hearing about Joe Judge and how his tenure has gone there? I think people still around here feel like he just left, but the reality is he's been there for a couple seasons now and it's gone the way it's gone. So is this somebody that they're going to want to ride this out with, or is he in danger of maybe being fired at the end of the season, maybe alongside Gettleman?
He could be. 6-10 and 4-10, and you don't want to hear injuries as an excuse. Every team has injuries. My God, the Baltimore Ravens are taking the Packers to the brink with Tyler Huntley, and the Steelers are trotting out Ben Roethlisberger at 39 going on 69, and they're almost coming back to beat the Vikings when they're down 29-0. I just don't want to hear injuries and excuses. Like, I get it. Mike Glennon's your quarterback. The deck is stacked against you, but you're not seeing much fight out of that team right now. That being said, I think they do like Joe Judge a lot. I think that the Mars want him to be the head coach for a long, long time. They don't want to cycle through head coaches. They don't want to have to constantly be resetting, and which is fine. I think that I don't know where I stand on Joe Judge. I've talked to players that love him, that do think he's building a foundation. When they were dead as a doornail, 1-7 last year, he got them to fight then. So you can talk yourself into it. However they do it, they need a GM aligned with him. They need to have that structure, and they need to be on the same page, and then they need to make the right decisions. And it starts with Daniel Jones. We're led to believe Joe Judge, he wants to ride it out. Like he wants Daniel Jones to be his quarterback. I think they'd be possibly repeating the same mistake they made with Eli Manning. If you can convince yourself of this quarterback, you can talk yourself into this quarterback. He's still the guy that had the 19 fumbles his rookie year, 5th most all time for any player, and can't stay healthy. So good luck. Good luck. Well,
now we've got a young quarterback here in New England that we're watching very closely too. What were the landmines that they have hit, during his development here, Tyler? Is it about Daniel Jones, or is it about the situation? Because, and you do a great job of laying out in your piece, all the investment that they've made on the offensive line, and it just hasn't worked out. And, maybe Andrew Thomas, high-end first-round pick, ends up being a great player. But outside of that, you can't have one great player on your offensive line and then expect a ton from your quarterback. So where have they screwed up here on the quarterback front so that, we as Patriots followers can look ahead and say, okay, don't do X, Y, and Z, or else you might end up with a quarterback who fumbles all the time and doesn't really know how to manage games. It looks like they've been able to avoid that through 1 year of Mac Jones, and I wouldn't expect him to get worse. But if the investment in the offensive line goes away, if that stuff starts to get worse, maybe you see a different sort of level of production from the young quarterback here. So what's been the biggest issue for Jones, in your opinion?
When I talked to one of their longtime scouts that they canned, he just brought this up out of nowhere. He's like, look at the New England Patriots offensive line. Left tackle, smallest left tackle in the NFL. Center, undrafted free agent once upon a time. Right guard, 4th round pick. Right tackle, big and lazy, and a team gave up on him, Trent Brown. But they coach that group probably better than any team in the NFL. They get those guys to be in sync, in unison, and kick ass. And they go to Buffalo against a bunch of 1st-round picks and 2nd-round picks. And, I mean, they've doled out huge contracts, Star Latulele and Mario Addison, and they just bully them. They just push them around. So you can invest all you want. And that investment could be for nil. And Nate Solder, the Patriots gave him to the Giants when he was broken. I think the Patriots are in a good spot just with how they coach offensive linemen. Like Mac Jones is always going to have a good offensive line. Starts there. Wide receiver's been a little tricky in New England over the years, so they probably could use another weapon or two, but I don't know if it matters. I just love the way New England plays. I think that's where football is in 2021, and you work a little play action off of that, hit a big play here and there, and he'll be successful. I don't know if people caught it in our story, but Mac Jones, the quarterback coach with the Giants, I'm going to mispronounce his last name. You're going to have to help me out, Phil. Shaplinski. Yes. Loved Mac Jones. Absolutely loved Mac Jones. And if he was running the team, which he's not, maybe he would have pushed for that and taken a quarterback there when they had the chance. So Patriots can also thank the Giants for letting Mac Jones.
Yeah, Jerry Shaplinski, and he's seen some pretty good young quarterbacks come through here. He was really instrumental in the development of Jimmy Garoppolo. Jacoby Brissett didn't spend a lot of time here, but that was Jerry's job, right? Josh McDaniels was the quarterbacks coach. Jerry, and he worked with Tom. Jerry got the young guys and had to bring them along. And it was almost like 2 separate tracks because Brady was so much more advanced, obviously, in the offense and understanding of NFL defenses, that it was like this whole other separate operation that Jerry really was in charge of. But Mac Jones is, we've been saying it for months now, but Mac Jones is everything that the Patriots want in terms of understanding defenses, getting the ball out quickly, throwing it short and sideways and accurately, and taking care of the football. That's what he does. And a lot of teams, they sort of scoff at those attributes, but that's what this Patriots offense is. So I think Daniel Jones was a Senior Bowl guy too, wasn't he, Tyler? I think he was. I think, yeah. And it's funny to look at your piece, because I think we view, and I love the Senior Bowl. We talk about Senior Bowl a ton on this podcast. We have Jim Nagy on every year. He tells us about guys that, might be Patriots fits. And, the Patriots, for instance, my understanding is they fell in love with Kyle Duggar at the Senior Bowl, right? So Division II guy, you don't get a great look at him against good competition at Lenoir-Rhyne, but he goes to the Senior Bowl. He holds his own. He's a great athlete. And then you start to really get hot on the guy, and you end up taking him in the 2nd round with your first pick a couple of years ago. But it sounds as though Dave Gettleman maybe falls too hard for guys at the Senior Bowl. What's your sense from the scouts that you talked to for this piece in terms of just how much is put on that 1 week? Because it's just 1 week at the end of the day, and there's great competition there. And again, that's why we like it, but it sounds like maybe a little bit too much emphasis was placed on that week there.
Well, I think the week, it does tell you a lot, right? You can design drills in a certain way. You get this player versus that player. I remember Aaron Donald just, mauling people at the Senior Bowl, and he's doing it against some of the best offensive linemen that are going to be in the draft. So you can draw a lot from it, in the drills, I think. But there's a reason that a lot of these guys, they leave before the game's even played. I know it's good for TV, but there's so many restrictions with the game itself, with blitzing, and I'm sure you know that better than me, but I don't know how you can watch the Senior Bowl game and think, boom, that's our franchise quarterback. And that's what Dave Gettleman said, 3 series, whatever it was, full bloom love. And even if you're talking about the week, right? It's an all-star week. It's an all-star game. I just don't know how you can make a franchise defining decision at quarterback at 6th overall. It's a little different than Kyle Duggar. I mean, off of that, really. It boggles the mind, but that's why they're in the state they're in.
It is. It's different than a 2nd round safety, right? Who's, who you can coach up if he's got the right tools. Quarterback, there's so much more involved there. I feel like you do have to have a little fuller picture. I do want to ask you, Tyler, about, well, so first of all, again, folks, if you haven't read Tyler's piece on the Giants here, golongtd.com. Subscribe. You can give a Go Long subscription to the football fan in your life as a last minute Christmas gift. I know I'm not the only one doing last minute Christmas shopping. You are as well. If you're listening to this podcast, we're all probably procrastinating to a certain extent. Go to golongtd.com, buy a subscription, give it to that football fan in your life, because they're going to get great content, great writing. Tyler, one of the best in the country. But Tyler, you do a phenomenal job covering the Bills as well, and you follow that team very closely. So we've got this big game coming up. I'm going to ask you for a score prediction in a minute, but I do want to ask you, do you feel like this could be a referendum of sorts where you have the team with the great quarterback versus the balanced football team? And what wins right now, right? I would have said 6 months ago, probably the team with the great quarterback is where you want to be. This year, and you've written about this, the teams that run the football, that play good defense, that are physical, that are tough, those teams have been having a lot of success. To me, this feels like whoever wins this game could sort of answer that question to a certain extent.
I totally agree. I mean, if the Bills are going to make a run, Josh Allen, and I'm actually at a coffee shop right now as we do this podcast. They've got a cardboard cutout of him here, like bigger than life. I mean, he's larger than life here. Actually,
be careful what you say. Be careful what you say.
I don't know if you can see.
You get a little Christmas magic in there. He comes to life. He just, choke slams you on the table if you call the Bills soft or something, Tyler.
Exactly. Yeah, he's looking at me. But he's got to be larger than life. He's got to carry this team to the playoffs and beyond. I don't see the Bills as constructed winning any other way with the coach they have, who's still punting all the time, kicking chip shot field goals all the time. I think he's coaching as if Trent Edwards is his quarterback. I don't see the offensive line the way they're built, or the defensive line the way they're built, just going out there and winning a 14-10 game. But like, Allen is unbelievable. Like, he could just throw the team on his back and carry this team. He could. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he went out to Foxboro and just lit it up and did what he did against the Bucs. Will that happen? I'm not betting against Bill Belichick, man. I mean, nobody game plans for a specific quarterback and a specific opponent like him. I think he'll have, a curveball, a slider. He's going to throw something at Sean McDermott that they're not ready for. And yeah, I give me the complete team. Give me the team that is running the ball and being smart with the ball. I'm sure those turnovers against the Colts just drove Belichick nuts. You're talking to him, but if they don't turn it over, I don't see the Bills stopping the run. I see Mac Jones hitting a few big plays when it's not 50-mile-per-hour winds, and I see their defense maybe not shutting Josh Allen down, but confusing him enough to force him into a bad throw or two. I mean, they'll sit back into coverage. They'll sit back into some zone. They'll mix up some pressures and show him something he hasn't seen.
Tyler, are the Bills soft?
I have to say yes, right? I mean, I'm not getting off that train quite yet. I mean, yeah, it's a word that people don't like to use in football, but I think it's bigger than just running the ball, stopping the run. It's a mindset. It's coaching scared, like Sean McDermott tends to do. It's lifting your foot off the gas pedal. It's all of these things. And, I think you saw it after the game where it looked like Bill Belichick got into his head in that press conference. I think that he's kind of in his head, and they could change all that. If you go to Foxboro and you win big, you can change that narrative. But right now, I think the way they're built from the front office and the kind of player they found, they wanted that 235-pound linebacker that can chase around a quarterback, and the lighter safety and the lighter offensive line that's athletic. I mean, it's soft by NFL standards in 2021. But to me, it's just much about the mentality, and like, they're front runners. Like, if they got the foot on your throat, they could win by 30 like they did in New England last year. But if you punch them, they usually don't know how to punch back, at least this season.
I just find this matchup to be so interesting because they are built so differently. And I was talking to our buddy Matt Fairburn the other day about how there's talks in Buffalo about maybe putting a dome in Buffalo, maybe partly because they've got this great quarterback and they want him to be able to throw the football. They don't want 50-mile-an-hour winds in Western New York, impacting their games. And the Patriots, meanwhile, they, of course, would love for this thing all of a sudden for a nor'easter to sweep through Foxboro on Sunday afternoon and muck it up and play slow and grind it out and just be the tougher team and win that way. it's such a great contrast in style. Styles make fights. And I feel like the fight on Monday night a few weeks ago, it just was so in the Patriots' favor that the weather worked out the way it did that day, that I think we'll get a little bit truer representation of what this matchup is on Sunday.
You're probably right. It probably did play into their favor, but I don't know. I feel like they were starting to open up the playbook for Mac Jones a little bit. And if the weather was not a factor, I mean, you were looking at Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace.
Right.
And, this is as good of a secondary coach as Sean McDermott is. You've got some matchups you could take advantage of in the right spot if you're New England. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Mac Jones went out there and made a big play through the air. I mean, I know Buffalonians, they love to mock him and make fun of him, but, look at his rookie season versus Josh Allen's rookie season. Mac Jones is blowing him away if you were to look at the numbers.
It's night and day. And he even late in that Colts game, I give him credit. I mean, he gave it away twice. He started the fire that he later had to try to put out. He helped start it at least in Indianapolis, but he made some throws down the field in that game that I thought were tremendous, and, tight windows down by the goal line. I mean, Mac Jones can play. And so, very different style quarterback than the one we're going to see on Buffalo's sideline this weekend. But every which way, when you compare these two teams, you put them side by side, there are interesting matchups to look at and for us to dig into. But Tyler, thanks for digging into them with us a little bit, going over your Giants story. GoLongTD.com. Check it out, subscribe, give away a subscription for Christmas. Tyler Dunne, thanks so much for being on the Next Pats podcast, man.
Oh, man, thanks so much for having me, Phil. It was a pleasure. Let's do it again. And we got to have you on our podcast one of these days. We'll make it happen. Anytime. Plug your podcast. What's it called, Tyler, so people can subscribe to that as well? Absolutely. It's the Go Long podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Jim Monis, he was a scout with the Eagles, the Saints, and the director of personnel with Doug Whaley with the Bills. Lives here in Buffalo. We just get together, drink some beer, tell old war stories. So it's a lot of fun. It was a great listen. I listened to you guys. You guys must have recorded right after the Monday night Patriots Bills game because I listened I was driving back home. I had to drive back and forth that day. And it was a great listen on the drive home. It was just, thanks for listening, man. It was great to hear people that, that follow the team as closely as you guys do, though, to chop it up after a game like that was so strange in so many ways. But to hear about a lot of the things that led to that moment and how the team was built and how they've handled big moments. Great stuff from you guys. So make sure you go check out the Go Long podcast as well. Tyler, thanks again, man. Thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate it. All right. Great stuff there from Ty. Just a phenomenal job on that Giants story. I do think it's interesting. How is Joe Judge working there? What's the scouting situation like there? How much emphasis did they put on the Senior Bowl? Some Patriots connections there in terms of things that we can project out. I think it's great to hear about these teams sometimes and try to figure out what not to do. The Patriots have this great benefit, right, of having one constant who knows what he's doing in Bill Belichick at the top of the totem pole, and the ability to tell the rest of his staff, coaching, personnel, whatever it is, what he's looking for, and to be able to lean on all of their previous success, whether Tom Brady's here or not. I think this year in 2021 has proven that what they've built in terms of a program works. Does it get them to a Super Bowl in year one with a new quarterback? And are they the best team in football after 1 year down? We're not there yet, but what they're doing tends to work. And they've taken a huge free agent class. They've taken a handful of young players from the last two draft classes. They've incorporated them all into this culture, into this team, into this scheme on both sides of the ball. And they've made it work. Again, we'll see if it's championship caliber, but it certainly is working well enough for them to be a good, consistent football team when they're going the way that they should, and they're taking care of the football, and they're not going crazy with the penalties the way they were in Indianapolis the other night. So what not to do? Good examples there from the Giants. And then great to hear from him on the Bills as well, even though this team has done some things that maybe would indicate, okay, there have been some changes made since the last time the Patriots saw them. And we know that game was a strange game. I mean, it was certainly, I would say, accurate in terms of
the assessment that we can get from both sides when it comes to the running game. When it comes to the passing game, though, I shrug my shoulders. I mean, 50-mile-an-hour gusts are 50-mile-an-hour gusts, and the Patriots obviously didn't even try to pass. And I think they can have some success throwing the football in better conditions. As Tyler suggested, they're down their top corner, Tre'Davious White, Levi Wallace on the outside, Dane Jackson, late round pick out of Pitt. Are those guys going to be able to match up? Well, the Patriots might be dealing without some receivers too, but the Patriots are going to have to win some of those matchups on the outside. I don't think this is going to be a game where you're going to run it 46 times again and hope that it works out. I mean, even in Buffalo, as much success as they had running the football, they did score 14 points in that game. 14 points is not going to be enough, in my opinion, to win on Sunday. We'll see, but that's just my guess because the Bills are going to be able to score as well. So going to be really interesting to see how that game plays out. And again, how these teams are built. Would you rather the superhero quarterback or the team, the well-balanced, well thought out, deeper roster, more impactful in all three phases team? I think this game will tell us a lot because it was just last year where we looked at the championship weekend in the NFL, AFC and NFC, and we said, would you look at that? The four best quarterbacks in football are the last four left standing. And you can't just have a quarterback. You can't be the Houston Texans with Deshaun Watson. That's not going to work. You do have to have some other pieces. But if you've got a great quarterback, your chances of making it to the very end are really, really good. Let's see if that's changed. Because if the Patriots win this game, they go on to win the division. They go on to make the playoffs. They have a home playoff game. And the Bills are maybe at home earlier than everybody thought they would be in 2021 or 2022. Then I think we can start talking about, okay, this was the year where things started to shift, where with good coaching, good defense, good running game, you could get through with a good quarterback. And I think Mac Jones is a good quarterback. I think he's a slightly above average quarterback right now. He's not elite. I think Josh Allen is on the cusp of being an elite quarterback. And so we'll see which one ends up winning the day on Sunday. All right, that'll do it for Next Pats. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We have another Next Pats coming at you next week where we will help you ring in the new year, 2022, with another great podcast. So make sure you're tuning in for that. Rate, comment, subscribe, tell your friends. I talked about you could get a Go Long subscription for the football fan in your life for Christmas. You know what? You could give them a subscription to the Next Pats podcast for free. You just grab their phone, you somehow unlock that thing, go to Next Pats, subscribe, say Merry Christmas. Your deed is done for the holiday season. That's a pro tip from yours truly. You're welcome. We'll talk to you next week.